If you are listening to this, you are participating in what is, well, arguably the most radical reinvention of work since the assembly line.
That's a strong statement, but I think it's true.
I mean, the bedrock of 20th century labor, that singular 40-hour work week, the fixed office, the linear climb up one corporate ladder,
Right, that whole standard.
that standard is dissolving. We are witnessing this seismic shift toward maximum flexibility, exponential income potential, and a complete redefinition of where, why, and crucially, how we earn a living.
It's a powerful frame. And the stack of sources we have today perfectly illustrates this global restructuring. We're not just talking about, employees asking to work from home on Fridays.
No, this is way beyond that.
We are tracking a full-scale rebellion and reinvention. Our sources reveal three massive interconnected movements. First, you have the macro shift.
Okay.
This is where geopolitical instability and digital friction are driving a serious global brain drain. Then second, there's the structural shift. Corporations are abandoning fixed time for asynchronous autonomy, with AI just pouring gasoline on that fire.
And the final piece.
And finally, the individual shift. This is where people are trading the perceived security of employment for the leverage of self-employment, and for many, the goal of financial independence.
So our mission today is to go granular on this transformation for you. We want to unpack the actual economic cost to nations that can't keep their best people, the structural changes that make the 40-hour week obsolete.
And the very real psychological and financial calculus involved in making that leap.
Exactly. We need to know what you gain, but also what you lose when you trade that linear security for exponential potential.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a stack of sources that tell a story of rebellion against the linear job. This is a story about human capital in motion, and it really starts with immense pressure at the national level.
We begin with the macro picture because the pressures driving individual choices, I mean, the decision to seek autonomy, they're being magnified by these massive forces that go way beyond an individual desk or Zoom meeting.
That's right.
And we have this startling case study here in the sources. It paints a pretty bleak picture of human capital flight, where one nation is becoming, well, by necessity, an exporter of its best and brightest.
And the data is an alarming snapshot. It covers the years 2024 through 2026, and the momentum is, frankly, terrifyingly fast.
How fast are we talking?
The cumulative outflow of registered overseas employment is expected to exceed 1.5 million citizens over just those 2 years.
1.5 million people.
And, in the past, labor migration often meant movement of manual or semi-skilled labor people leaving for factory jobs or construction work. That whole narrative is fundamentally changing.
That qualitative shift is the crucial takeaway for you. The composition of migration has shifted so sharply toward highly skilled professionals. These aren't just, warm bodies leaving.
No, these are essential, irreplaceable components of the national infrastructure.
The sources provide hard numbers that should shock any policymaker. Over just 24 months, we are looking at losses of approximately 5,000 doctors, 11,000 engineers, and 13,000 accountants.
And think about the implications of those specific professions for a second. Losing 5,000 doctors degrades public health infrastructure for decades. It impacts birth rates, longevity, disease management, everything.
And 11,000 engineers.
You can forget about any major infrastructure projects, water systems, energy grids, roads. It all grinds to a halt. Then you lose 13,000 accountants, and you see a decomposition of the financial and institutional knowledge base you need to maintain a modern economy.
So this isn't just a loss of personnel.
It's a hemorrhage of institutional capacity.
And we see this most acutely when we zoom in on a single sector, like healthcare. The sources highlight a historic increase in nurse migration. I mean, a staggering 2,144% increase between 2011 and 2024.
2,100%.
So why is this happening? It's because European nations like Germany, which have aging populations and increasing healthcare demands, are running these targeted, aggressive recruitment strategies.
They're offering fast-track residency schemes.
It's essentially a red carpet they're rolling out to attract this skilled talent. They aren't waiting for the nurses to come. They are actively poaching them.
Exactly. This isn't accidental drift. This is targeted human capital acquisition by developed nations. And while some talent is leaving via traditional channels, getting on a plane and taking a job overseas, an entirely new phenomenon is emerging among the highest skilled workers.
This is the group the sources call the invisible migrant.
That's the one.
It's a fascinating term. We found that the physical, registered migration of high-tier IT professionals, the software architects, the data scientists, It actually declined by over 30% in 2025 compared to 2024.
Right, which seems counterintuitive.
It does. If the brain drain is accelerating, why is the physical departure of the most digital workers slowing down?
Because they don't need to physically move and take a job to change their economic residency. They are becoming invisible migrants. They might keep their physical location or maybe move to a neighboring country or just remain nominally resident. But their economic output and, crucially, their tax dollars flow elsewhere.
And the single biggest driver for this shift isn't low wages.
Not at all. It's digital friction.
Digital friction sounds like a minor annoyance, maybe a slow Wi-Fi connection, but the sources quantify it as this massive, modern, intangible reason for departure.
It's anything but minor. We're talking about instability caused by things like a national internet firewall combined with repeated large-scale connectivity disruptions that plagued the nation throughout 2024 and 2025.
Let's ground this in a real example for the listener.
Okay, so imagine you are a senior data scientist based in this nation. You are on a crucial, high-paying consulting call with a client in London. You're about to deliver a critical analysis, and suddenly, your internet drops for the third time this week.
And that's due to a government-mandated firewall adjustment or just a failure in the national infrastructure.
Right, and in that moment, your reputation is instantly damaged, your project delivery timeline is compromised, and your income is directly threatened. That's digital friction. It's an abstract policy or infrastructure weakness translating into a concrete, immediate loss of income and opportunity.
And the economic damage is staggering. The sources estimate that the economic losses from these digital interruptions alone totaled $1.62 billion in 2024.
And that's not just a number. The cumulative duration of these disruptions was 9,735 hours, affecting 82.9 million users.
But the real impact, the targeted impact, is on the labor market that relies entirely on that connectivity.
Absolutely. This nation is the world's fourth largest freelancing hub. It boasts 2.37 million freelancers. When their primary tool of production, the internet, is unstable, their business dies.
And freelancers reported a devastating 70% drop in work opportunities during these periods. 70%. That massive reduction in income is the primary reason thousands of these skilled professionals have relocated, becoming those invisible migrants.
So these software developers and data scientists, they pack up and move to established nomad hubs like Portugal or Estonia or the UAE.
Yep. They keep their roots, but their economic productivity now fuels foreign ecosystems. They're sending massive output dollars outside the country. And this creates what the sources call the remittance paradox.
This is a really important concept to unpack.
It's an essential synthesis point. On one hand, you have remittances money sent home by workers abroad, hitting $3.2 billion in November 2025.
And that cash infusion provides a short-term financial cushion, right?
Yeah.
It stabilizes foreign reserves. It masks the immediate pain of the economic exodus. It makes things look fine on the surface.
Exactly. But this short-term gain comes at an enormous opportunity cost.
I want to challenge that a bit because for a lot of families, that $3.2 billion is essential. It's not just a number on a spreadsheet. So how do we know this opportunity cost isn't just a theoretical economic construct? Because the cost isn't measured in money. It's measured in innovation. The warning in the source is stark. It says, if the nation keeps exporting its best coders, data scientists, and cybersecurity experts without a strategy to bring them back, we are effectively subsidizing innovation elsewhere.
Okay, so what are we losing specifically?
We're losing ideas, products, and patents we never created at home. We're losing the next startup that employs thousands, the next software export that earns billions, and the intellectual capital that would solve domestic problems. That is the real, long-term, invisible price of digital instability.
And faced with this growing desperation to leave, the state's response has been, well, understandably defensive.
You could say that. We saw regulatory tightening by the Federal Investigation Agency, the FIA, at airports. They offloaded a massive 66,154 passengers in 2025.
Which is up significantly from 35,000 just the year before in 2024.
And the stated justification for this crackdown was multifaceted. They were citing questionable document veracity and attempting to combat organized begging rings. For example, they noted 24,000 Pakistanis were deported from Saudi Arabia for begging in 2025 alone.
So the government is trying to stop what they see as this unorganized, often illegal outflow.
But this creates enormous tension. It's the conflict between border enforcement trying to stop illegal activity, and the mobility rights of legitimate skilled travelers.
And the sources show this
So,
conflict went right to the top. The prime minister had to intervene in December 2025.
yeah, he specifically directed the FIA to ensure legitimate travelers were not arbitrarily profiled or inconvenienced.
It really encapsulates the impossible choice. Do you stop the exodus, or do you enable the globally connected worker who is providing those remittances?
Exactly. This friction proves that location no longer guarantees loyalty or productivity. It's all up for grabs.
It's incredible. We've just seen how global instability and digital friction are forcing skilled workers to seek autonomy and flexibility elsewhere.
And while governments are fighting to manage who leaves and who stays, the very thing they are fighting to retain, the 40-hour work week, is crumbling from within. It's being destroyed by technological changes and a whole new understanding of productivity.
That's a perfect narrative bridge. To really grasp how radical this collapse is, you have to look back at the origins of the 40-hour work standard. I mean, it feels like an ancient law of physics, but it was, in fact, a policy intervention.
And it was born directly from the brutality of the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly.
The 40-hour work week is not a biological necessity. It's a social construct. In the 19th century, industrial workers were subjected to these grinding 10 to 16-hour work days, 6 days a week.
With no breaks, little regulation on child labor, just brutal conditions.
Absolutely. The movement to regulate this was known as the short time movement, and it was all focused on improving the quality of life.
And the famous rallying cry came from the social reformer Robert Owen in 1817. It's still incredibly influential. 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest.
It was about dignity and balance. But it took a long, long time to codify it legally.
In the United States, that legal codification finally arrived with the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, the FLSA.
And this established the foundational framework we still, for the most part, operate under today. The 8-hour day, the 40-hour work week, and the concept of time-and-a-half overtime pay.
It also set the federal minimum wage, which, and this is critical, has been stuck at $7.25 per hour since 2009.
The framework is static, but the world has moved on.
And we can't skip the role of business leaders in driving this change, specifically Henry Ford. In 1926, he voluntarily implemented the 5-day, 40-hour work week for his factory employees.
Which was a radical move at the time.
Totally. And he wasn't doing it purely out of altruism. He recognized that for his workers to afford and enjoy the Model T cars they were building, they needed two things.
Leisure time and disposable income.
Exactly. The time clock wasn't just a measure of labor expended, it was a mechanism for creating the consumer class that drove his future sales.
And now, a century later, the standard of 40 hours is being challenged again. But this time, the challenge is driven by data on efficiency.
The productivity argument for working less is just overwhelming now.
It is. OECD data shows that across member countries, annual hours worked are generally declining. And what's crucial is the negative correlation. As labor productivity income per hour improves, the number of hours people work decreases.
We are simply better at producing value.
We are, which means leisure time is now a more valued commodity.
And the 4-day workweek trials provide the concrete evidence that managers can no longer ignore. I mean, look at the famous Microsoft Japan trial. They gave employees Friday off.
And saw a massive 40% increase in productivity.
40%, it's wild.
And the UK trial was even more comprehensive. 92% of the participating companies decided to maintain the 4-day model permanently.
92%, so it wasn't a fluke.
Not at all. The data showed increases in revenue and productivity, but the employee wellness benefits were the true indicators of success. 71% reported reduced burnout.
And a staggering 65% reduction in sick days.
We've seen similar patterns with companies like Perpetual Guardian in New Zealand and Unilever. This isn't just a quirk of one industry. It's a systemic recognition that rested, focused people produce better results faster.
This move away from fixed time is only possible because of the new digital foundation of the workplace, hybrid and asynchronous autonomy.
The adoption has been incredibly rapid. 53% of employees are now in hybrid setups, and we expect 80% of IT companies to follow suit.
The core driver here is autonomy, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sources show employees who work in the at-will hybrid model, meaning they have the flexibility to choose whether they are in the office or remote on any given day report 65% satisfaction.
And how does that compare to the others?
It's much higher.
Yeah.
Compare that to 57% for fully remote and only 53% for fully on-site workers. That sense of freedom and control over one's time is a massive factor in mental health and retention.
You trust the employee to manage their life and their work.
And they reward that trust with higher performance,
But that flexibility relies entirely on one key enabler: asynchronous communication, or async.
which is desired by 95% of remote workers. For the listener who hasn't fully integrated this concept, async means you don't expect an immediate reply. You shift the focus from being present now to delivering results when ready.
And you rely on written communication that others can consume at their optimal time.
The efficiency gains are tangible. Teams that master async communication save an average of 6 hours weekly.
6 hours, just from cutting out meetings that could have been an email.
Exactly. In fact, research suggests asynchronous tools can replace over 40% of standard synchronous meetings. But here is the critical cultural shift. Async demands rigorous documentation.
This is the handbook-first culture. To work asynchronously, everyone must know where the single source of truth resides.
Right. The sources reference GitLab's famous public handbook, which, if you printed it, would span over 2,000 pages.
2,000 pages.
That massive living document means nobody has to schedule a 30-minute meeting to ask, hey, how do we handle X? The answer is written down, it's accessible across all time zones, and it makes constant synchronous coordination unnecessary.
That being said, async isn't a panacea, is it?
No, it's not. When teams are widely distributed, reliance on written documents can sometimes slow down critical, high-friction problem solving.
Right, there are times you just need to get in a room and whiteboard something.
Exactly. And the research highlights this challenge. Every hour of time separation between colleagues reduces synchronous communication by 11%. So if your team spans 12 time zones, relying on real-time calls for collaboration is a non-starter. You have to use async, but you also lose some of that spontaneous benefit.
And this movement toward documentation, flexibility, and outcome measurement, it perfectly sets the stage for the final structural shift, the AI-first operating model.
It's the logical next step.
We saw Shopify, a company famous for pioneering remote first back in 2020, declaring a shift to AI first today.
This is a signal that all major companies will eventually follow. The CEO, Toby Lutke, has essentially stated that using AI effectively is no longer a perk or a department. It is now a fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify.
So if you can't leverage the tool,
You won't be performing at the required level. Simple as that.
this is where the hybrid model becomes a massive strategic advantage. Companies that are already hybrid are inherently better positioned for this AI future,
Why is that?
because they already measure performance by outcomes, not hours in seat. They already trust their employees to use decentralized tools, and their decision-making structures are built on autonomy.
The implicit warning to legacy companies is stark then. If you are stuck in a rigid 9-to-5 everyone in the office model, you cannot successfully integrate generative AI.
You just can't. The AI revolution optimizes tasks and output. It doesn't optimize presence.
Right. If your underlying operating model relies on surveillance and presenteeism, plugging in AI will simply reveal how inefficient your system is. Or worse, it will slow down adoption because you can't even measure the value the tools are creating.
Autonomy and trust must come first.
It's incredible. We've seen how macro pressures push skilled talent out and how corporate structures are fundamentally dissolving the concept of a fixed work week.
It feels like all these external forces are funneling one individual decision. Do I stay the linear employee, or do I make the great escape and seek exponential autonomy?
Exactly. This environment creates the perfect context for the ultimate individual transformation, embracing the multi-hyphenate identity and moving from being an employee to being an entrepreneur.
So the singular job title is becoming insufficient to capture the value of a modern skilled professional.
It is.
Tell us more about the multi-hyphenate identity. It sounds like something only creatives do, but the sources frame it as an economic necessity.
It is absolutely economic. A multi-hyphenate is defined not by a single corporate silo, but by a portfolio of skills and interests. The author, consultant, podcaster, journalist. Their income is derived from multiple streams.
And their identity is defined by the skills they possess, not the chair they sit in.
Precisely.
I find the concept of creating the freedom to rebalance your work portfolio to be genius. You are essentially managing your career like a hedge fund.
That's the perfect analogy. If the economy is shifting or a specific industry is contracting, you can rebalance. You can maximize steady, secure income from a long-term consulting contract. That's your stable bond exposure.
While simultaneously pursuing creative pioneering in a volatile, high-growth area like launching a new software product.
Which is your high-risk equity exposure. You have control over your risk profile, which an employee simply does not have.
So now let's drill down into what the entrepreneur is rebelling against. This is the employee's linear trap. The sources use incredibly evocative language here, describing the steady salary as a sedative.
It's a sedative that lulls workers into complacency.
That's a powerful idea.
It is, because that sedative is powerful. It gives you just enough stability to stop hunting. You stop seeking massive leverage, and you start waiting for your quarterly bonus, waiting for the annual 3% raise, waiting 20 years for a retirement that may or may not provide the lifestyle you want.
And while you wait, inflation is eroding that stability.
Yeah.
We need to be crystal clear with the listener on this. If your job gives you a 3% annual raise, but your housing costs, groceries, and gas have risen by 5%.
You took a pay cut.
You actually took a pay cut. You are running faster and faster on a treadmill that is actively speeding up beneath you.
And this creates what we call the concrete ceiling of linear income. Your wealth potential is directly tied to your physical labor input, the hours you can physically put into a day.
There are only 24 hours available, and you can only work efficiently for a portion of that.
So your potential wealth has a hard, linear upper limit that no amount of sheer effort can break through. You trade time for money. It's a one-to-one transaction.
The most eye-opening concept in this entire section for me was the middleman tax. We need to really let this sink in for a moment.
It's fundamental.
You may receive a $100,000 salary from your employer, but that is only because you are creating, say, $200,000 in observable, measurable value for the company.
That's right. The vast hidden chasm between the value you create, the $200K, and the paycheck you receive, the $100K, is the owner's profit margin.
That margin is the premium they earn for taking the risk, building the infrastructure, and owning the systems.
And you pay that middleman tax to the company for the convenience of showing up and being told what to do. The entrepreneur, by owning the system, eliminates that middleman tax and claims the full value.
And this leads directly to challenging the very notion of job security. I think this concept is so pervasive it needs to be dismantled for the listener.
It's a myth built on convenience. Employment is essentially the highest risk financial bet you can make. You are betting your entire financial future on a single customer, your employer.
Yeah.
And that single customer can eliminate your job tomorrow to save a fraction of a percent on their quarterly earnings, and poof, your income stream goes to zero.
Whereas entrepreneurship,
Paradoxically, is the safer path because you diversify your income across hundreds or thousands of customers. If one client leaves, you feel it, sure, but your livelihood doesn't cease to exist.
So the shift to entrepreneurship isn't merely a career adjustment. The sources describe it as a violent rebellion against that linear trap.
It is, and is built entirely on the power of exponential advantage and, critically, leverage.
Leverage is the operating principle of the modern autonomous worker. It's about disconnecting income from physical presence.
Right. As an employee, you are the leverage for someone else's capital. As an entrepreneur, you use code, capital, media, or labor to multiply your own efforts.
You write a piece of software, record a course, or publish a book that generates value and sales for decades.
Independent of your daily caloric expenditure. The fundamental difference is that you are paid for the systems you build and own, not for the time you spend working within someone else's system.
And beyond cash flow and equity, the single greatest tool available to the entrepreneur, the true accelerator, is the tax code.
This is where the difference between the W-2 employee and the business owner becomes mathematically impossible for the employee to overcome.
It's a complete game changer.
Think of the W-2 employee. You earn $5,000, the government taxes it immediately, and you receive the net amount. You then go buy a $50 coffee with already taxed dollars. You live on the leftovers.
But the entrepreneur lives in a completely inverted reality.
They do. They earn $5,000 in revenue, but before they pay taxes, they pay for business growth.
And this is where the spending becomes pre-tax dollars.
Exactly. They spend pre-tax dollars on essential business expenses. If they are an IT consultant, their new laptop, their high-speed internet, their business travel, perhaps a percentage of their vehicle, a portion of their home office, all of it comes out before the government assesses their taxable income.
That ability to reinvest pre-tax dollars into your own growth is what allows for mathematically impossible compounding when compared to the employee who pays tax on the first dollar earned.
It's why the system is structurally set up to reward ownership and risk-taking.
And the ultimate prize, which is completely inaccessible to the linear employee, is equity.
A job dies when you leave it. You cannot sell your seniority, your accrued vacation, or your corner office. It has zero resale value.
But a business,
Assuming it has customers and systems, is a tangible asset with a valuation, typically calculated as a multiple of its annual earnings. This business is something you can sell for a lump sum equal to 5, 10, or even 20 years of a corporate salary.
A liquidity event that creates an estate and changes the family line for generations.
That is the definition of exponential wealth creation.
But this freedom is not cheap. It acts as a necessary filter, and we absolutely must address the cost of admission, the valley of death.
This is the reality check. This is the period in the early stages of entrepreneurship where you work harder than you ever have in your life. You're clocking 80-hour weeks for less money than you made in your first job out of college.
You're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., consumed by stress and self-doubt, wondering if you just made the biggest mistakes of your life.
And I think anyone who has truly tried to launch a side hustle or pivot into their own business knows exactly what that looks like.
It's less of a valley and more of a sheer terrifying cliff you're trying to climb with minimal gear.
That temporary suffering is the crucible that forges character, and it is the necessary price of admission for a life of autonomy. The salaryman avoids that fire, seeking the warmth of steady, predictable pay.
But in doing so, ensures they will never become the master of their own destiny.
And that core self-reliance, the belief that you can survive on your own wits and systems, is the most profitable asset you will ever own.
But the path to freedom is heavily guarded by financial friction. We have data showing that even workers who just want to switch jobs, let alone start a business, face significant barriers.
Nearly 1 in 4 workers, 23%, were prevented from changing jobs in the last 5 years due to financial hurdles.
The list of financial hurdles is specific and often unavoidable. The largest barrier is potential gaps in health coverage at 36%.
Which is particularly critical in the U.S. system.
Absolutely. That's followed by the need to take unpaid time off for interviewing or searching, 32%, and the expenses related to upskilling or reskilling, 30%.
If you are living paycheck to paycheck, even a 2-week gap in pay or spending $1,000 for a certification course is an insurmountable obstacle.
And the sources note that these barriers disproportionately affect specific groups, which just exacerbates existing economic inequality.
Low-income and non-white workers face these problems far more acutely. For instance, Black workers were significantly more likely than white or Latino workers to cite technology-related expenses and the need for upskilling funds as major barriers.
So if you can't afford the equipment or the training necessary to secure the next high-paying hybrid role, you are trapped in the legacy system.
So, for those planning the transition from employee to entrepreneur, the advice drawn from the sources is clear. Planning is paramount. You need a detailed business plan outlining goals and financial projections.
But most critically, you must create financial wiggle room, what some call a runway or an escape fund, while you are still in your current job before you light the match.
And in terms of launching the business, the key advice is to avoid the temptation to be a generalist. Start highly specialized. You must remain experts in a few things and focus relentlessly on a specific niche target audience first.
And only then, after that core foundation and reputation are immaculately built, do you gradually expand the client base.
Right. Specialization enables the initial high pricing and clear marketing that generalists simply cannot achieve.
This has been a journey. We've established the macro forces pushing people toward autonomy and the undeniable economic advantages of that exponential entrepreneurial path.
And for a massive segment of the audience, that path is aimed squarely at achieving financial independence, retire early.
But the sources reveal a profound paradox. Even once you win the game, the challenges don't simply end.
The cornerstone of the FIRE strategy and the mathematical engine that drives this dream is the 4% rule. This guideline, pioneered by financial planner Bill Bengen in the 1990s, is crucial for you to understand.
Okay, so how does it work?
It suggests that if you withdraw 4% of your total retirement savings in the first year, and then adjust that dollar amount annually for inflation, your savings have a very high historical probability of lasting 30 years or more.
So it provides the benchmark number for the listener to aim for. Calculate 25 times your desired annual spending, and that's your FIRE number.
Right, but the sources stress that the 4% rule is only a starting point. It's a guideline based on historical worst-case scenarios, not a strict, rigid rule you must adhere to every January 1st.
That's a key distinction. Real-world retirees rarely follow a fixed rate.
Exactly. They use variable withdrawal strategies. They spend more in good market years, enjoying their freedom, and they drastically cut back or maybe take on some part-time consulting work when the market is struggling.
That flexibility greatly enhances the long-term sustainability of the portfolio beyond what the strict static 4% rule suggests.
And there's a fascinating concept in the sources about the hidden safety margin built into the rule.
What's that?
The 4% rule assumes that your spending remains constant relative to inflation
Yeah.
throughout those 30 years. But decades of data show that is simply not true.
So what happens in reality?
Retiree spending typically declines by 2–3% annually as they age, especially once they pass the major spending phase of early retirement. The big travel, the new hobbies.
So if you factor in this reduced spending,
The research suggests the true safe withdrawal rate may actually be closer to 6% in many market scenarios, which provides a massive cushion for early retirees.
but once the financial math is solved, the human element takes over. And the shift brings with it an entire new set of unexpected, often deeply emotional challenges that money simply can't solve.
The most severe is the profound psychological void.
This is described beautifully as the loss of contrast between struggle and pleasure.
For decades, your pleasure, the weekend, the vacation, the time with family, was defined by the contrast with the struggle of the work week. If you treat every single day like a weekend, the weekend loses its meaning.
The sources quote Shakespeare to perfectly illustrate this. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be as tedious as to work.
That is profound. You are saying that freedom, without a structure to contain it, quickly leads to a form of existential boredom or worse.
That's it. Many high-achieving people who hit fire find themselves craving routine or structure after a very short period of complete unstructured relaxation. Without the defined purpose of the career, many risk falling into depression or aimlessness.
They may have solved their financial problems, but their mind simply invents new problems to fill the void.
And for those who are highly successful, their identity was often inextricably tied to their career title and their expertise.
So early retirement means they experience the emotional difficulty of losing that sense of purpose and the feeling of being needed as an expert or a decision maker.
This means they have to find new ways to scratch that intellectual itch. This might mean highly specialized volunteering, maybe teaching a college course once a week.
Or self-indulgent learning like mastering a complex foreign language or deeply studying astrophysics. It must be something that validates their accumulated knowledge.
Proving to themselves and others that they are still a valuable, contributing member of society, not just someone with a large bank account.
Then there are the unexpected social and family demands that come with having limitless time. When you retire early, everyone you know assumes you have constant, unstructured availability.
This is a major friction point.
Friends, family, neighbors. They assume you are available for random hangouts, emergency childcare, medical appointments, planning cruise holidays, afternoon tea, running errands for them, ad hoc volunteer work, and general favors.
So the early retiree is quickly inundated with demands because others believe their time is worthless now that it's not monetized.
Which requires the retiree to set very firm boundaries very quickly, or risk their new freedom being consumed by other people's agendas. Time management becomes a new source of stress.
And we also have to be real about the specific financial stressors that even a successful early retiree faces, particularly in the U.S.
The two biggest shocks are health insurance and longevity. Health insurance costs are a massive financial stressor, especially before Medicare eligibility kicks in at age 65.
You're forced to buy expensive individual or family plans, which can drastically eat into that 4% withdrawal rate.
And you also have to factor in the potential for significant health issues to arise in middle-age issues you didn't have to worry about when you had robust corporate coverage. The plan must be incredibly robust to handle unexpected long-term care needs.
So the key mental reframing here is critical. It's not enough to run away from something bad.
That's the summary of the entire section. It is better to retire to something than from something. If you run away from a terrible job without a plan for what you are moving toward, a new purpose, a new passion, a new routine, you simply exchange one form of misery for another.
The mind abhors a vacuum.
The sources summarize the essential truth that applies to life, finance, and psychology. Our problems expand to fill the available space in our minds. Once work and money are solved, the mind simply finds plenty of other things to worry about, and the quest for true peace begins anew.
We have covered so much ground here today. We've traced the economic pressures from geopolitical instability, tracked the collapse of the 40-hour work week driven by AI and data.
And charted the deep personal calculus required to trade a linear salary for exponential equity and autonomy.
The sheer magnitude of the shift is breathtaking. We are moving away entirely from 20th century labor standards, where physical presence guaranteed productivity and seniority was sacred.
We are now firmly in a hyper-flexible, outcome-driven economy where trust, documentation, and digital fluency are the new baseline.
So what does this all mean for the institutions that govern us and the cultures we inhabit?
It means that institutions must immediately catch up to the reality of the autonomous worker. The societal challenge is profound. How do states and legacy economies adapt to retaining skilled talent when digital friction, not geography or low wages, is the primary driver of migration?
Governments can't build a better firewall.
No. They have to foster an ecosystem where the invisible migrant wants to be productive locally. The future of work is fundamentally about optimizing autonomy and flexibility while simultaneously mitigating the unexpected psychological and social costs that freedom imposes.
So if we don't understand that freedom requires forging new identities and setting rigid boundaries,
That freedom can very easily become a prison.
that's the challenge. Let's think about the historical context one last time. The 19th century fight for the 8-hour day established a minimum threshold for time, and pay it protected the worker from physical abuse and overwork.
Right, it was a floor.
But now, modern work structures are replacing those fixed hours with pure outcomes. We're paid for the systems we own and the value we generate, not the time we expend. So if outcomes are the new currency, what new rights or economic structures must be created to ensure the value of a person's time is protected?
Rather than simply letting problems expand to fill the available space in our minds.
Exactly. That's the challenge for the next generation of labor reform, and something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.